The politics in the aftermath of the election is going to be in the national conversation for at least several more weeks to come. Most importantly, the presidential petition, which now enters a new week, is going to be heard and determined. So, can we try and make sense of all of this? Because today, NASA says it served both the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, IEBC, and President Kenyatta's lawyer, who are the two respondents in that presidential petition. NASA wants nothing short of the presidential election declared to be so marred with irregularities that it was impossible to declare who won, and therefore a new presidential election called, and that's why they're in the Supreme Court. Let me bring out my panel right now. Kibe Mungai, the advocate, is here. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. And also joining me tonight from all over the country, I've got let me start with Mombasa, because there is Sureya Hersi. She's a commentator and a political analyst. Also with me from Kisumu is the advocate Mboya, and in Eldoret for me is Dr. Masibo tonight. Thank you all so much for coming in. Let me start with Kibe, because this is at the center of what we're talking about. NASA says this presidential election, and I want to bring up a graphic so everybody knows what we're talking about. The part of their statement when they went out is that data analysts have examined over 25,000 result forms for vote declarations and detected 14,000 of them had errors ranging from statutory documents not signed by returning officers, others not authenticated by official rubber stamp, and yet others that do not have agent names or signatures. That is just one of the issues they're raising in their submission. Do you think this meets the threshold of declaring the presidential election to be so mad with the irregularities that there needs to be a new one?
The starting point is this, that all elections cannot be held with total perfection. And therefore, in any court, in determining whether or not there were irregularities, has three things that it requires to do. Number one, to determine whether there were indeed those irregularities were there. Number two, to determine how serious those irregularities were. And number three, to determine whether the irregularities that have been seen to be there affected the results of the elections. So that it is possible to say forms were not signed and all these things. This cuts across all the elections, and we have returns for all the elections. And some of these things are bound to happen, particularly when you have 6 elections. But the critical thing would be, now that the Court of Appeal, for example, said that elections would be conducted in each of the 290 constituency,
right,
to the extent that I've read the NASA petition, it has not come to my attention that there is any single or 10 constituency where they are pinpointing it and saying that there were these elections in this particular constituency was conducted so badly that the results, for example, shows that Uhuru Kenyatta won, and he ought not to have won, right, had it not been for those irregularities.
Okay.
And therefore, in my view, the issues that you are raising, there is a sense in which the issues that have been raised still rest at a general level.
Okay.
The specifics that would be required, in my view, to hold that an election was invalid do not seem to be clear in this petition.
Apollo, is it odd? Let me show you the number of votes cast. For the instance, in the presidential election, there were 15.5 million people that voted for the presidential election. But for governors, for instance, there were 15.09, and for MPs, 15.008. So it does mean that there are 400,000 people that voted for president, but did not bother to vote for governors or any other seat. Is this odd, Apollo, do you think?
Who participated in the election amendment process as one of the rapporteurs. We indeed, listening to the legislators, indicated that all the ballot papers for the 6th election must be cast.
Right.
And everybody was given all the ballot papers for those positions. What needs to happen then, there could be ballot papers that are spoiled in respect to a particular elections, but in the total tally, all of them should tally up, because everybody was required to vote for all those positions.
Okay, that's one thing. So tell me, having said what you have said, The presidential election was so badly conducted and marred with such glaring irregularities, this is what NASA says, that it does not matter who won or who was declared the winner thereof. This is what they say.
First of all, to start with the question about the changes.
Yes.
When I saw the analysis in one of the newspapers yesterday, it is clear that this was in all strongholds. You go to in Kisumu, there seems to be more presidential votes for Raila than in Central Province. And so that you cannot be able to say that it is in one area where the kind of presidential votes being more than the governors and the MPs were restricted to certain zones. But now, coming to the second questions, as to whether it was so bad that there could be no winner. Of course, a winner, the role of IEBC was to declare a winner. There were so many people, even if one was to assume that the 15-point-something votes, apart from those ones that are over and above the other that were voted, that were valid, those that there is no debate whether or not they were valid, there can be a winner that can be determined on the basis of those votes. Let us remember that the difference between number 1 and number 2 was about over 1.3 million people. So that assuming that the question is about the validity of 400,000 votes, this will not change the value. It will not change the tally either way. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, there was a winner that would be declared irrespective of the minor irregularities that might even be proven in court.
All right, everybody's still sitting here with me, and I want to go to Eldoret for a moment. And Daktari, the argument here is both a legal and a political one, right? Because the lawyers might argue in court as they're going to do over the next 2 weeks, but this, part of the solution to this is also political.
Yes. Yep. Actually, I think at the end of the day, the decision is based on the results that we've just had, which was a culmination of a political process. And from where I sit, the decision to go to court was both legal and political in a sense, yes. Political because if Raila had decided that he was not going to go to court like earlier on promised, then the situation would have been very radically different. And so what we are witnessing now is a situation where we are giving, I think NASA is giving the courts an opportunity to be able to confirm whether President-elect Uhuru Kenyatta won fairly or not. It's really up to the courts, because up to the Supreme Court in this particular case.
It's up to the Supreme Court, but Sureya, as we wait, the country is kind of on edge for another 2 weeks because they don't know what is going to happen. Do you think this is necessarily healthy for political debate?
For the next 2 weeks, actually, I think we should be prepared to witness some slumber, some slowness as we await the decision of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And I think it's important to appreciate that we may not have to be really worried like if it had not been that NASA had gone to court.
Great.
Take, for example, a situation where we for the first 2 days, when Raila came out and announced that the results had been doctored and that the computers had been interfered with, you almost witnessed a scenario where violence was breaking out. And had that been continued, then the situation would have deteriorated very fast.
Okay.
So I want to take it that yes, it is easy. We could be looking forward into a very difficult situation for the next 2 weeks, but it's better than what would have happened if NASA had opted for any other choice other than going to the courts.
A reaction to the president and the deputy telling supporters, telling Kenyans that go on with your lives. These disagreements are political in nature and they don't need to be represented among you, the ordinary Kenyans. What do you think, Sureya?
I totally agree with what they're saying, Larry. I think the rest of the public has moved on. And if there's any tension, then it's with the top leadership, because it means so much to them. But indeed, I agree with them that politics is over. Let's wait for the Supreme Court verdict. But the rest of the Kenyans need to move on, and we still live together. As I mentioned earlier in Mombasa here, our leadership is opposition, because let's say it's NASA, and some of us are supporting Jubilee. We've moved on, and I want to believe that in our own small ways, we will support the development of Mombasa. We are not going to wait for 5 years for anything else to happen.
But you see that politics of moving on is controversial because among NASA supporters, they see this accept and move on narrative as a way of denying them justice. They say we will not move on until they feel that justice has been done, if it is through this Supreme Court process.
Yeah, you can say that, Larry, but to be honest, even the political leadership that has been elected, not necessarily the top leadership, they've moved on. We've seen members of parliament starting doing their work even before being sworn in. So people have basically moved on. And I think by the end of the day, this politics was about Jubilee and NASA. And by the end of the day, we still have to live as community. We still have to live as neighbors, and we work together. So I want to support what the president has said, that the fight up there should not affect our day-to-day lives down here. But whichever way it goes in the next 14 days, I still want to believe we will move on. We have to be part and parcel of the development of this country. And we wait for the next 5 years and see what happens next. But if we talk about justice, then I think it's only the Supreme Court can tell us who is the winner after 14 days.
Dr. Masibo Lumala, I want to bring you in on this because it's something that's controversial among certain Kenyans. The idea of moving on appears to be to accept that all went well and let's move on with our lives. Your reaction to that?
First and foremost, I think I agree with the Jubilee leadership in calling for calm and in asking Kenyans to remain peaceful, and so that as we await for the decision of the Supreme Court. But the phrase of move on, it has always raised some concerns, of course, in terms of when you say move on to where, okay? Accept and move on. Accept what? And then move on to where. I do agree that, yes, decisions have been made, and as we speak now, quite a number of governors have already taken the oath of office and have started working. Many more, including my own governor here in Uasin Gishu, Bwana Mandago, will be sworn in tomorrow. And we expect that those who are validly elected in a free and fair and transparent manner, I think they have to take up their responsibilities, and the Kenyans must settle back to work. The only challenge then we have to ask ourselves is, as we await the verdict, quite a number of Kenyans are concerned to know what will happen if the Supreme Court, for example, accepts the petition. That means we are going to have another presidential election in another 60 days, and probably then by the 1st of October or 1st of November, we should be able, depending on when the Supreme Court will deliver the ruling, then we can look forward to another electioneering period. If the court, however, dismisses the petition, then the president will be sworn in probably on the 12th of September, and then we will be able to see another 5 years of Jubilee leadership. And at that point, I think the phrase of accept and move on really does not come in, because basically we are looking at a free, fair, transparent, and accountable electioneering period.
All right. So in all fairness to Sureya, she didn't say accept and move on. She just said move on. But let me ask you this, Sureya. When you say move on to where is the question that Dr. Masibo has. Move on to where?
He's just talked about his governor. He's moved on, he's been sworn in, and he needs to now look at the development of his county. He's moved on as far as I'm concerned, to deliver service to the people. He's been elected for a purpose. He's not going to get stuck after being sworn in and that's it. No, he needs to deliver on his manifesto.
Right.
He needs to serve the people irrespective of which party affiliations they come from. I think for me that's leadership. And when one fails, he's failed as an individual, not as a party. I think parties will end after 2 weeks. We forget about who is NASTA, who is Jubilee. By the end of the day, every Kenyan deserves to be given what they need as a person. So I think sometimes we really take this politics just too far, and we forget the needs of why we are elected as leaders. And people join political parties most of the time, not because they love those parties so much. It's because sometimes you don't have a choice. If I give you an example, you're in Central Province. If you want to win, you just have to be in Jubilee. So probably you don't even believe in the manifesto of that party. But what I believe in is, as an individual, if you are there to serve people, irrespective of which party affiliation, get down to business and move on to serve the people who elected you.
All right, great. Everybody stand by. I'm going to come to both of you in a moment. I want to bring out also Apollo Mboya here. And part of NASA's statement, bring up this, guys. The IEBC selectively manipulated, engineered, and deliberately distorted votes and counted them in favor of Uhuru Kenyatta in order to affect the final result. It also goes on to say that the effect of this systemic and systematic manipulation of and manipulation and distortion of results renders it impossible to tell who actually won, let alone know whether the threshold for winning a presidential election was met. That might be a great statement for the media and for supporters, but how do you go about proving that in court, Apollo? Because it seems to be quite a difficult thing to try and prove before a judge, especially one panel as esteemed as one of the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Larry. You had my learned colleague, Kibe, talk about discrepancies.
Yes.
And it did indicate, indeed, that if there are discrepancies, it was across the board, and that you cannot say that there was a discrepancy in a particular stronghold of a particular candidate. But that's the crux of the matter, that this was widespread, it was systematic, and then you cannot then end up with properly legitimate elections. And again, you must understand that the petition of NASA is predicated on 5 issues. Right. The first one is on the use and misuse of government resources to campaign. The second aspect is the question of tallying and transmission. The third issue is also on tampering of votes through the system. And also we have the 5th issue on how the polling stations that were not gazetted purportedly transmitted election results. So I think if you read, apart from reading the petition alone, you need to also read the affidavit of Honorable Raila Odinga and the attachments to it, and you will realize that it is something that they are very confident that they will prove to court.
All right, Kibe, do you agree what Apollo says?
I don't quite agree, because to say that there were irregularities across the board, this was expected. We did not expect that the score of any election would be 100%. In fact, many times they say that if an election passes like the UN standards, about 70%, that would be a good election. The key issue still would have to be the moment the Kenyan laws required, and as interpreted by the Court of Appeal, that the elections will take place in constituency.
Right.
There is still an absence in this petition of NASA, where you are tying, like to say, in constituency A, Uhuru Kenyatta did not win this election, and the winner was so and so. This is the kind of evidence that is taken with a lot of gravity. And the one regarding tampering, for example, is the one that would be a key issue. For example, when you talk about use of government resources,
yes,
this was a government, there would be a response. Let me not preempt it. There will definitely be a response from Uhuru Kenyatta, probably that he was engaging in the normal course of his business during his constitutional mandate. But the more critical thing is this: even if now you are to say that this amount of resources were used, now are you going to tie it to a specific constituency where you say that it could have been different had it not been for the usage of government resources? Right. And how many are these? Okay. To the extent that the final result would have changed because of that reason.
Okay, Apollo, you respond to that. I also want to find out for you. Some people are raising concerns by the fact that the affidavit does not have one that from Musalia Mudavadi, who was Raila Odinga's chief agent in this entire process. So it seems to be odd that he's not one of the people that NASA intends to call as a witness.
You'll realize again, in the Supreme Court, there are no witnesses that are called. The evidence is tendered by way of affidavit.
Right.
and there is no time for witnesses to come and testify.
That being so, is it odd that Musalia Mudavadi is not one of those that signed an affidavit?
Again, the law does not require that Musalia Mudavadi must put in an affidavit.
Right.
Any voter, an expert, and there is an affidavit by an IT expert. There could be an agent, not necessarily Mudavadi. So there is no irregularity on that particular issue, and there is no witness that is going to take a stand in the Supreme Court.
Okay, that said, this IT expert that NASA intends to has got an affidavit. He's a man whose credibility has been questioned before because those logs that were supposed to show the hacking ended up being quite actually punctured, and a lot of IT experts said, well, they don't quite prove something. So how is this the person whom NASA still appears to be basing a lot of their case, at least on the hacking angle, on?
Thank you. Now, if you read the Constitution, the electoral system is supposed to be free, fair, simple, accountable, and these are a particular word that I like. They are verifiable. Now, verifiable requires that there, apart from forms, that's 34A, that are used to verify the votes that was actually tallied at the polling station and again transmitted to the constituency tallying center. The first prayer that NASA has put in the petition is that within 48 hours, IEBC is supposed to provide access to the server and all the logs of the KIEM system. And that particular expert will therefore then corroborate that, the findings that he has put in the petition with what is going to come out from those systems that have been requested as the first prayer in the petition.
All right, great. Kibe, I want you to respond to this because he's said a couple of things that you must have a response to.
Yes, the most important thing is that verification of an election is important. But this verification, let us remember, the Court of Appeal said that the returning officer, together with the presiding officers, by the time when the final results are coming from the constituency, they are completely verifiable. And therefore, for me, the issue of transmission, even assuming that there was hacking, for the sake of argument, I don't think that in itself would prove anything, because at the end of the day, the key issue would still remain. These votes are still in the ballot boxes. These votes were recorded in forms 34A, and then 34B was prepared. If now you are not able to be able to prove on the basis of what happened before the presiding officers and the constituency returning officer that there were irregularities, I don't see how far you can be able to get with the issues of transmission. And of course, there is another something else. That time is really against the NASA petitions. I've seen in their petition they are asking for the prayer that there should be an audit, and as a result of this audit, then you can be able to say how bad the election, the transmission, and all these other irregularities could have affected who was the winner. But the key issue now is this: I do not see what kind of an audit is going to be possible on the basis of affidavit during these 14 days, which in my view, again, would have been, I would be curious what this audit, if it were possible, would have disclosed. But for purposes of the affidavit evidence that is there, I can summarize and say that the NASA petition does not really have much of a punch. It is so general that you can't really be able to say that there is a smoking gun that you would be able to say, this thing is so bad, it must be invalidated. That one is lacking.
There's no punch, Apollo, he says. There's no smoking gun here that says this election was so bad it's got to be invalidated. What is your reading of the same?
Larry, in one of the arguments in the NASA petition is that 11,000 polling stations that were not gazetted transmitted results. that in itself is a serious, not only smoking gun, but a burning gun. And you will see, even from the reaction of Jubilee side, including the president has already started campaigning already. He was at the Kenyatta market, and I think he'll be visiting other few places to witness the inauguration as part of the campaign, because they know this is a serious matter.
My Lord friend Mboya is a good politician. Of course, I don't think there were 11,000 polling stations transmitting, because at the end of the day, what I know is that the 40,000, and they're available even online.
Right.
The 40,000 Forms 34A are now available, together with 290 Forms 34B. And therefore, as far as I'm concerned, I want to see how it will work out at the end of the day. These allegations about non-existing polling stations.
All right, Dr. Masibo, let me ask you this. What do you think, how different does the country look if the Supreme Court in fact does grant NASA's prayers and say this election is invalidated and we have to go to another presidential election? How different will the country be? And does Uhuru Kenyatta win that new election, do you think?
Larry, maybe before I respond to that, I have been listening to Kibe, and he's saying that irregularities were expected. I don't think that's what IEBC promised the country to the run-up to the elections. They assured the country that everything was in place, and especially with the KIM system. I remember when they did the dry run, there was a clear demonstration of how this will work. So probably I don't think it would be very nice to tell the country that irregularities were expected. To some degree, yes, but if NASA can be able to prove that the irregularities were over and above a particular threshold,
right,
then they definitely have a case.
Okay.
As for Form 34A and B, before I go to your question, 290 Form 34Bs were at the Bomas of Kenya during the final tally for the presidential election, which led to the culmination of announcing President Uhuru Kenyatta as the winner. At that point, then, one would have expected that every constituency had tallied their Form 34S, and by the time we were coming to this conclusion, then all Form 34S were at the Bomas of Kenya. But again, this was not the case. So the verification bit of it, I don't think is something we want to go into. Probably the NASA lawyers and the Jubilee lawyers will fight that out. Now, assume the Supreme Court rules in favor of NASA, then definitely the country should be poised itself for another campaign mood. And as to whether President Uhuru or Raila will win is a matter of waiting and see. But definitely I think when you look at Jubilee now, they have the numbers, you know. You look at the MPs who won on Jubilee and the governors, they are certainly more than those of NASA. And so President Uhuru Kenyatta will start off on a better note, on a higher pedestal, considering that he will have more foot soldiers in the country, across the country, to campaign for him. But again, it depends on how and whether these MPs there will be petitions to confirm whether they won validly or not. At the end of the day, it will be a fresh election, and I think it will be up to Kenyans to decide whether they want to have a Raila presidency or to have a continuation of Uhuru Kenyatta for another 5 years.
Great, Sureya, let me just pick up and continue that conversation with you. Do you think Kenya is ready for another election if the Supreme Court in fact does grant these NASA prayers and calls for a fresh election in 60 days like must happen?
Well, Larry, unlike 2013...
All right, I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut you there.
NASA supporters might not be very happy, but to be honest...
Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Masibo. I want to go to Sureya first. I'll come back to you. Yes, Sureya, go ahead.
I'm saying I don't think Kenyans are ready for another election. To be honest, to go for 60 days, 2 months of campaigns, don't forget it's not the two principals that are going to campaign. It's all the rest of the supporters. So for me, I think we've seen what happened. The 1 week that people were in elections, you cannot find anything in the food stores. People were not going to work and things like that. So I don't think Kenyans, I think there'll be a standstill for another 60 days. That takes us to almost December. So you can imagine some of the losses that we will encounter. But I think it will be unfortunate, or it will be unfair if I said that, especially for the aggrieved party. But let's realize that when you have two people going for a contest, there's only one winner. So whichever way, we just have to accept the verdict. But personally, I think Kenyans have moved on, and they are not ready for another election. People want to put food on the table, Larry. I keep saying NASA and Jubilee does not put ugali on our tables. We still have to wake up in the morning to work.
I see Apollo Mboya really wants to jump in there real quick about people have moved on and they're not ready for another election. Apollo, what do you think?
It's a very bad narrative. It's a very, very bad narrative. And all the time now, we are going to say that, yes, there are problems, so let's put it under the carpet and move on. Let me tell you, it will implode. It will implode even in your own house if you always think that cleaning is to put all the dirt under the carpet one time. It will not hold. And it is important that whenever there are issues, questions that have been asked with respect to election, they are answered. And I think the best decision that NASA took was to go to court and lay bare all this evidence that they say they have, so that they can be tested.
It will implode. Sureya, do you agree? Because he says we should not be sweeping issues under the carpet.
Sincerely speaking, there has to be a solution. We are not putting things under the carpet. But I just hope, as the lawyers say, what we need in the Supreme Court is actually evidence, evidence, evidence. It's not about public perception. We've had a lot of conflicting information, even from the lawyers themselves. There are those ones who have said 2013 case was even weightier than this time round. So it's a bit interesting, because it can actually make or break NASA. That's what I think. We are not putting anything under the carpet. The ruling will come out. But remember, Baba said that this is the time for the Supreme Court to redeem itself. So he already has an expectation in his own mind. What about if it doesn't go his way?
Dr. Masibo, what do you think of that?
If you do not have faith in the same institution that you went to after saying you never go to court.
Another election or not is predicated on spending. And of course, it takes a lot of time, and the campaigns, again, will take us back. 2 months of campaign will be very costly for this country, especially economically. Already the 3 months we had a problem to the country. But if that is the cost of justice, then I think there will be no problem Kenyans going to another election. The difficult part of it is that, and which I suspect could happen, is that there will be a very low voter turnout. If people have gone back to their places of work and people have settled back, traveling back again to the upcountry, for example, for those who had been traveling, may find it difficult to come and participate in an election again.
Kibe,
but the reality is, this is all up to the Supreme Court to decide. If the evidence available is sufficient enough to warrant that we go back to another election, it will happen. If the evidence is not enough, then I think we shouldn't. 2 weeks is not long to wait, Larry. We can wait for those 2 weeks.
Kibe, what do you think of this whole debate about the preparedness, or even if the readiness for another election, if that's what happens and NASA gets the prayers granted?
I think an election would have to be held. Is not a matter of choice, because that's a matter of law. That is what is expected. I agree there is a possibility that there will be low voter turnout. There is already a lot of political fatigue in Kenya, and I empathize when the issue of people, supporters who seems to be voting, like across the country for Raila Odinga, and it does not seem to be winning elections. So that's a matter of concern for his supporters. But talking about the audit that they are talking about in this particular election, let us remember that NASA, what it lost is a general election. They did not just lose the presidential race. There were 6 elections. When you look at them closely, they lost all of them. Therefore, moving forward, and I think we need to start that now, moving forward, what would be important in my view is NASA to interrogate and carry out an audit. It appeared to me that their principal, particularly Mudavadi, Raila Odinga, and Kalonzo Musyoka, did their own political work properly to lobby the people and to get support. But it appears to me that there were certain strategic errors that could have been done by their strategists, that at the end of the day, you remember, like they went out there to protect the votes. When it was obvious from the word go that Jubilee had won 2013, they started with more votes, and then their strategy was to go and get more votes. NASA started with fewer votes, even at the beginning of the campaign. But they went on assumptions that we need to protect these votes. So that when you consider that they appeared to have protected these votes, they added up to about 6 million. But since they did not make sufficient efforts, even to guard Jubilee from encroaching into their areas, is the reason why they lost. So they just need to be honest with themselves, because as of now, Jubilee, even when Mboya was saying that they are already campaigning, I don't think they are campaigning for 2017. They are campaigning for 2022. And Ruto already may have won it 40%. So if they need to prevent Ruto from winning these elections, honesty would be the first issue, and an honest audit why they lost again. Otherwise, the narrative would have to be repeated again in 2022.
Okay, Apollo.
Their supporters may be told to move on again, which would be unfair.
Apollo really wants to jump in there, so go ahead.
Yes, Larry. Yes, Larry, you asked a very good question about Supreme Court redeeming itself. Me, as a legal professional, I think there's some aspects that the Supreme Court must use this opportunity, because it's a one in a million opportunity to redeem themselves on certain aspects, and I want to talk about those aspects. First, we expect that at the end of it all, each judge, if at all they sit the 7 of them, because the minimum also is 5, they can be 5 judges, but each of them should at least issue their judgment and reasoning, even if they end up with the same conclusion. Why am I saying this? Because we want to interrogate that what did the judge consider and how did they analyze each point which allowed each of them to reach a particular conclusion. So there they must redeem themselves, because in 2013 they never did that. There's one judgment. The second aspect that I expect them to redeem themselves on, they should not issue a finding and then tell the public that we reserve the judgment to be issued another date. That is corruption. Because when you say such a thing, you give a one-liner finding and then you reserve the judgment to be issued another date. We don't know when it is being written. So on those two aspects at least, they must redeem themselves on.
Kibe, I want you to respond real quick because I want to finish up with Sureya.
I want to agree with Kibe and the other panelists with regard to voter apathy in case there is a rerun in this election. That definitely will happen, because campaign, there's a fatigue. There's fatigue, and definitely, yes, I expect that if at all it ends up in another rerun, there'll be low voter turnout.
Okay, you were making a point, Sureya, about this redeeming yourself, as the NASA argument was. Can you expect justice from a court that you've already told that it needs to redeem itself, realistically?
Actually, I didn't say it. It is Baba who said that this is it's an opportunity for the Supreme Court to redeem itself.
Yes.
And I was actually wondering, because it means when you say that, then it means you have your own expectations. And if the expectations doesn't go your way, then I just don't know what is going to happen. I think it's going to be a very interesting time, because as the panelists have said, voter apathy is also very high. And I give you an example of Mombasa. Voter turnout was about 60%. And don't forget, voter registration was very high compared to 2013. And still, I think the votes that Baba got should have been maximized. It should have been more than what he got, especially in, let's say, Mombasa and Kilifi,
right,
where opposition carried the day. And if we got 60% voter turnout, then let's be assured that when we have a rerun, we will have less than 60% voter turnout. And another thing that, Larry, we really need to think is about NASA is divided, because we had 3 different candidates within the NASA. They are not united. And after even the election results, I don't see the 3 groups coming together at the grassroots, not at the national. The national is a different ballgame. But when you come down to the grassroots, let's say the governor of Mombasa, the Wiper governor, the other governor, I don't think they'll come and unite for the sake of the national politics. I see it very different. So for me, the results might even be worse than before.
Dr.
Unlike Jubilee, that are one and the same, it's just one political party. And it's going to be something interesting to watch. But what I'm saying is, I think if we go for a rerun, it might be worse than before. And this might actually put the credibility of the NASA leadership, I think, in jeopardy. That's the feeling I have.
Dr. Masibo, respond to that as you talk about...
I think it's fair that everybody's calm.
Right.
We move on, and I keep saying we need to move on with our lives as we wait for the verdict of the Supreme Court.
Okay, Dr. Masibo is now laughing as well. So you want to respond to that as we talk about this issue of redeeming yourself that the court needs to?
No, I'm just laughing because Sureya loves this phrase, we move on. I am sure she also knows that we can fly away and we can use SGR instead of just walking away. Now, but you have raised the question of the Supreme Court redeeming itself. I think lately, and I think there was a footage to that effect, was it 2 days ago, where we had, during the campaigning period, the Jubilee duo, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy were able to lambast the judiciary on the manner they had handled various cases presented to them by NASA against IEBC. And in the same note, I think I heard the NASA Supremo, Raila, talking about the fact that this is an opportunity for the courts to redeem themselves. I really don't want to use the word redeem, because we are in a very different situation. Of the 6 judges that delivered judgment in 2013, 2 are not among them now. The outgoing Chief Justice is not there, and Justice Tunoi is not there now. And we have 3 new ones. So the situation is quite different, and the circumstances are different. I think we want to give the 7 judges at the Supreme Court a fair benefit of doubt.
Okay.
And we expect that they will look at this case fairly and as per the evidence presented to them, regardless of what Jubilee has said or what NASA has said. And I think that's what my take is. Wonderful.
And finally, Kibe, is this a chance, therefore, for the 7 judges to, quote, redeem themselves?
I don't think that judges, particularly in our system of justice, which you say is an adversarial system of justice, every day we go to court, there is usually an expectation that the case would be won or lost, sometimes for good or for bad reasons. What is different with the Supreme Court is that this is the final court. These decisions would be final. But what is expected is that judges, when they are making a decision, particularly important decisions like this, they know some people will be disappointed and others would be happy about their decision. But the only key yardstick that they need to use is that they must remain true to their oath of office. They must be objective, they must be impartial, and use the law, evidence, and the facts as they are to make a decision. And if they do that, the redeeming of themselves, in my view, would be to give us a judgment. And I agree with Mboya. I expect 7 decisions by all these judges so that we can see how they reasoned out. And I expect quality decisions. That would be sufficient.
You don't expect a summary? You don't expect
a summary is inevitable.
Like what?
Because the moment you do 14 days, chances are that this matter will begin most likely Monday after tomorrow, that other Monday. Then it is in all probability, the parties will be arguing this case until Wednesday, Thursday.
Okay.
So on Friday, when the decision must be given, I expect a summary. Then you'll be told to come for the reasons after 2 weeks. I don't agree. That is a fair way to be deciding cases. Such kind of important cases should be, the reasons and the decisions should be given at the same time. And this is why, in my view, that particular provisions of the law needs to be amended so that we have a minimum of 45 days, so that a quality judgment that when it is read, everybody satisfied becomes possible.
Great. And do you think if you were sitting in this case, would you grant the petitioner's prayers?
On the basis of what I've read, it looks too general. I don't think I would allow it.
And Mboya, if you're sitting in this case, would you grant the petitioner's prayers?
I will grant the prayers.
Okay, let's leave it there. I think we've seen the differences very stark. I must say thank you to everybody, Apollo Mboya, to Sureya Hersi, and to Dr. Masibo in Eldoret. We appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much for coming and helping us understand these complex issues, and we hope that we'll come back on our air soon. In the days ahead, there will be plenty to talk about, and we'll be relying on you to make sense of all of it.